Today we're going to go over the TOEFL IBT Quick Prep. So we'll be reading and learning about this book. So let's get started about the TOEFL IBT test. The TOEFL IBT test measures your ability to use and understand the English language as it is read, heard, spoken, and written in the university classroom. As with most accepted English language tests in the world, more than 7,500 universities, agencies, and other institutions in more than 130 countries accept TOEFL scores as part of their admission criteria. In order for the TOEFL IBT test to measure how well you read, listen, and speak, write English, and how well you use these skills together, you will be asked to integrate these skills. For example, you may read a passage or listen to a lecture and then write or speak about what you learned. Using TOEFL IBT Quick Prep. TOEFL IBT Quick Prep can help you prepare for the TOEFL IBT test. All the questions in this Quick Prep book are real TOEFL IBT questions given to examinees at worldwide test administrations, but some questions are presented differently than on the real test. Quick Prep includes questions from all 4 sections of the TOEFL IBT test: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. In Quick Prep, the listening, speaking, and writing sections include written transcripts of the audio portions of the test. If you have access to people with good English pronunciation, ask them to read the transcripts aloud to you. Listening to the transcripts is better practice than reading them to yourself. If someone reads the transcripts to you, make sure you see the pictures. As in the real test, you may take notes while you listen, and you may use your notes to help you answer the questions. For more information, you can go to the website listed, www.toeflgoanywhere.org. Let's begin with the reading section. This section measures your ability to understand academic passages in English. You can skip questions and go back to them later, as long as there is time remaining. Now begin the reading section. Reading Practice Set 1. Passage and Questions. Read the passage, then answer the questions. Give yourself 20 minutes to complete this practice set. The Rise of Teotihuacan. Paragraph 1. The city of Teotihuacan, which lay about 50 kilometers northeast of modern-day Mexico City, began its growth by 200 to 100 BC. At its height, between about AD 150 and 700, it probably had a population of more than 125,000 people and covered at least 20 square kilometers. It had over 2,000 apartment complexes, a great market, a large number of industrial workshops, an administrative center, a number of massive religious edifices, and a regular grid pattern of streets and buildings. Clearly, much planning and central control were involved in the expansion and ordering of this great metropolis. Moreover, the city had economic and perhaps religious contacts with most parts of Mesoamerica, modern Central America, and Mexico. How did this tremendous development take place, and why did it happen in the Teotihuacan Valley? Among the main factors are Teotihuacan's geographic location on a natural trade route to the south and east of the Valley of Mexico, the obsidian resources in the Teotihuacan Valley itself, and the valley's potential for extensive irrigation. The exact role of other factors is much more difficult to pinpoint. For instance, Teotihuacan's religious significance as a shrine, the historical situation in and around the Valley of Mexico toward the end of the first millennium BC, the ingenuity and foresightedness of Teotihuacan's elite, and finally, the impact of natural disasters, such as the volcanic eruptions of the late first millennium BC. This last factor is at least circumstantially implicated in Teotihuacan's rise. Prior to 200 BC, a number of relatively small centers coexisted in and near the Valley of Mexico. Around this time, the largest of these centers, Cucullo, was seriously affected by a volcanic eruption, with much of its agriculture land covered by lava. When Cucullo eliminated as a potential rival, any one of a number of relatively modest towns might have emerged as a leading economic and political power in central Mexico. The archaeological evidence clearly indicates, though, that Teotihuacan was the center that did arise as the predominant force in the area by the 1st century AD. It seems likely that Teotihuacan's natural resources, along with the city elite's ability to recognize their potential, gave the city a competitive edge over its neighbors. The valley, like many other places in Mexican and Guatemalan highlands, was rich in obsidian. The hard volcanic stone was a resource that had been in great demand for many years, at least since the rise of the Olmecs, a people who flourished between 1200 and 400 BC, and it apparently had a secure market. Moreover, recent research on obsidian tools found at Olmec sites had shown that some of the obsidian obtained by the Olmecs originated near Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan's obsidian must have been recognized as a valuable commodity for many centuries before the great city arose. Long-distance trade in obsidian probably gave the elite residents of the Teotihuacan access to a wide variety of exotic goods, as well as a relatively prosperous life. Such success may have attracted immigrants to Teotihuacan. In addition, Teotihuacan's elite may have consciously attempted to attract new inhabitants. It is also probable that as early as 200 BC, Teotihuacan may have achieved some religious significance, and its shrine or shrines may have served as an additional population magnet. Finally, the growing population was probably fed by increasing the number and size of irrigated fields. The picture of Teotihuacan that emerges is a classic picture of positive feedback among obsidian mining and working trade populations growth, irrigation, religious tourism. The thriving obsidian operation, for example, would necessitate more miners, additional manufacturers of obsidian tools, and additional traders to carry the goods of new markets. All this led to increased wealth, which in turn would attract more immigrants to Teotihuacan. The growing power of the elite, who controlled the economy, would give them the means to physically coerce people to move to Teotihuacan and serve as additions to the labor force. More irrigation works would have to be built to feed the growing population, and this resulted in more power and wealth for the elite. Now let's answer these questions. The word massive in paragraph 1 is closest in meaning to A. Ancient, B. Carefully planned, C. Very large, D. Carefully protected. We have the answer as C. Very large. Number 2. In paragraph 1, each of the following is mentioned as a feature of the city of Teotihuacan between AD 150 and 700 except A. Regularly arranged streets, B. Several administrative centers spread across the city, C. Many manufacturing workshops, and D. Apartment complexes. This is B, several administrative centers spread across the city. Number 3, the word pinpoint in paragraph 2 is closest in meaning to A, identify precisely, B, make an argument for, C, describe, D, understand. And the answer is A, identify precisely. Number 4, the word ingenuity in paragraph 2 is closest in meaning to A, ambition, B, sincerity, C, faith, D, cleverness. And the answer is D, cleverness. Number 5, which of the following is not mentioned in paragraph 2 as a main factor in the development of Teotihuacan? A, the presence of obsidian in the Teotihuacan Valley. B, the potential for extensive irrigation of Teotihuacan Valley lands. C, a long period of volcanic inactivity in the Teotihuacan Valley. And Teotihuacan's location on a natural trade route. So number 5, what is not mentioned is a long period of volcanic inactivity in the Teotihuacan Valley. Number C. Number 6, which of the following can be inferred from paragraphs 2 and 3 about the volcanic eruptions of the late 1st millennium BC? A, they were more frequent than historians once thought. B, they may have done more damage to Teotihuacan than to neighboring centers. C, they may have played a major role in the rise of Teotihuacan. And D, they increased the need for extensive irrigation in the Teotihuacan Valley. And we'll say it's C. They may have played a major role in the rise of Teotihuacan. Number 7. What can be inferred from paragraph 3 about Cuiculo prior to 200 BC? A, it was a fairly small city until that date. B, it was located outside the Valley of Mexico. C, it emerged rapidly as an economical and political center. D, its economy relied heavily on agriculture. So we'll say D, its economy relied heavily on agriculture. 8. The word predominant in paragraph 3 is closest in meaning to A, most aggressive, B, most productive, C, principal, and D is earliest. And the answer, C, principal. Number 9. Which of the following allowed Teotihuacan to have a competitive edge over its neighbors? A, a well-exploited and readily available commodity. B, the presence of a highly stable elite class. C, knowledge derived directly from the Olmecs about the art of toolmaking. Or D, scarce natural resources in nearby areas such as those located in what are now the Guatemalan and Mexican highlands. So this, we will say A, well-exploited and readily available commodity. Which was the obsidian they talked about. Okay, number 10. According to paragraph 4, what has recent research on obsidian tools found at Olmec sites shown? A, obsidian's value was understood only when Teotihuacan became an important city. B, the residents of Teotihuacan were sophisticated toolmakers. C, the residents of Teotihuacan traded obsidian with the Olmecs as early as 400 BC. And D, some of the obsidian used by the Olmecs came from the area around Teotihuacan. We'll say D, some of the obsidian used by the Olmecs came from the area around Teotihuacan. 11. Select 2 answer choices that mention in paragraph 5 as being features of Teotihuacan that may have attracted immigrants to the city. To receive credit, you must select 2 answers. A, the prosperity of the elite. B, plenty of available housing. C, opportunities for well-paid agriculture employment. D, The presence of one or more religious shrines. We're going to say A and D, the prosperity of the elite and the presence of one or more religious shrines. Number 12. In paragraph 6, the author discusses the thriving obsidian operation in order to A. Explain why manufacturing was the main industry of Teotihuacan. B. Give an example of an industry that took very little time to develop in Teotihuacan. C. Illustrate how several factors influenced each other to make Teotihuacan a powerful and wealthy city. D. Explain how a successful industry can be a source of wealth and source of conflict at the same time. We'll say C. Illustrate how several factors influenced each other to make Teotihuacan a powerful and wealthy city. Number 13. In paragraph 1 of the passage, there is a missing sentence. The paragraph is repeated below and shows 4 letters, A, B, C, and D, that indicate where the following sentence could be added. In fact, artifacts and pottery from Teotihuacan have been discovered in sites as far away as the Mayan lowlands and Guatemalan highlands, northern Mexico, and the Gulf Coast of Mexico. Where would the sentence best fit? Okay, so let's read. It says, the city of Teotihuacan, which lay about 50 kilometers northeast of modern-day Mexico City, began its growth by 200 to 100 BC. At its height between around about AD 150 and 700, it probably had a population of more than 125,000 people and covered at least 20 square kilometers. It had over 2,000 apartment complexes, a great market, a large number of industrial workshops, an administrative center, a number of massive religious edifices, and a regular grid pattern of streets and buildings. Clearly, much planning and central control were involved in the expansion and ordering of this great metropolis. Moreover, the city had economic and perhaps religious contacts with most parts of Mesoamerica, modern Central America, and Mexico. And I believe it's after this you would add this sentence. In fact, artifacts and pottery from Teotihuacan have been discovered in sites as far away as the Mayan lowlands, Guatemalan highlands, and northern Mexico and the Gulf Coast of Mexico. And that would be option D. Okay, number 14. Directions. An introductory sentence for a brief summary of the passage is provided below. Complete the summary by selecting the 3 answer choices that express the most important ideas in the passage. Some sentences do not belong in the summary because they express ideas that are not presented in the passage or are minor ideas in a passage. This question is worth 2 points. Write your answer choices in the spaces where they belong. You can either write the letter of your answer choice or you can copy the sentence. Teotihuacan was a highly developed city in Mesoamerica that reached its peak between about AD 150 and 700. Let's read the answer choices. A. The number of sophistication of the architectural, administrative, commercial, and religious features of Teotihuacan indicate the existence of central planning and control. B. Teotihuacan may have developed its own specific local religion as a result of the cultural advances made possible by the city's great prosperity. C. Several factors may account for Teotihuacan's extraordinary development, including its location, rich natural resources, irrigation potential, intelligent elite, and the misfortune of rival communities. D. As a result of its large number of religious shrines by the 1st century AD, Teotihuacan became the most influenced religious center in all of Mesoamerica. E. In many important areas from the obsidian industry to religious tourism, Teotihuacan's success and prosperity typified the classic positive feedback cycle. F. Although many immigrants settled in Teotihuacan between AD 150 and 700, the increasing threat of coerced labor discouraged further settlement, and limited Teotihuacan's population growth. So it's A, C, and E. And we just write them A, C, and E. We write into those spaces. Okay, we'll move on to the listening section. This section measures your ability to understand conversations and lectures in English. The listening section includes written transcripts of the audio portions of the test. If you have access to people with good English pronunciation, ask them to read the transcripts aloud to you. Listening to the transcripts is better practice than reading them on your own. If someone reads the transcripts to you, make sure you see the pictures. You may take notes while you listen, and you may use your notes to help you answer the questions. Listen to or read each transcript only one time. After each transcript, answer the questions. The questions typically ask about the main idea and supporting details. Some questions ask about a speaker's purpose or attitude. Answer the questions based on what is stated or implied by the speakers. Answer each question before moving on. Do not return to a previous question. Give yourself 10 minutes to answer all the questions in the listening section. Do not take the time it counts to listen or read the transcripts. Now begin the listening section. Listening practice set 1, conversation and questions. Here is the transcript. Narrator, listen to a conversation between a student and a librarian. Student, hi, I'm new here. I couldn't come to the student orientation, and I'm wondering if you can give me a few quick pointers about the library. I'd really appreciate it. Librarian, sure, I'd be glad to. What's your major area of study? Student, Latin American culture. Librarian, okay, well, over here's the section where we have language, literature, and the arts, and if you go downstairs, you'll find the history section. Generally, the students who concentrate in Latin American literature find themselves researching in the history section a lot. Student, you're right. I'm a transfer student. I've already done a year at another university, so I know how the research can go. I've spent a lot of time in the history section. So how long can I borrow books for? Librarian, our loan period is a month. Oh, I should also mention that we have an interlibrary loan service. If you need to get hold of a book that's not in our library, there's a truck that runs between our library and a few other public and university libraries in this area. It comes around 3 times a week. Student, hey, that's great. At my last school, it could take a really long time to get the materials I needed. So when I had a project, I had to make a plan way in advance. This sounds much faster. Another thing I was wondering is there a place where I can bring my computer and hook it up? Librarian, sure, there's a whole area here on the main floor where you can bring a laptop and plug it in for power. But on top of that, we also have a connection for the internet at every seat. Student, nice, so I can do all the research I need to do right here in the library. I'll have all the resources, all the books and information I need right here in one place. Librarian, yep, that's the idea. I'm sure you'll need photocopies too. They're down the hallway to your left. We have a system where you have to use a copy card, so you'll need to buy a card from the front desk. You insert it into the machine and you're ready to make copies. Student, how much do you guys charge? Librarian, 7 cents a copy. Student, that's not too bad, thanks. Where's the collection of rare books? Librarian, rare books are up on the 2nd floor. They're in a separate room where the temperature is controlled to preserve the old paper in them. You need to get special permission to access them, and then you'll have to wear gloves to handle them because the oils in your hands, can destroy the paper, and gloves prevent that. So we have a basket of gloves in the room. Student. Okay, thanks. I suppose that's all I need to know. You've been very helpful, thanks. Librarian. Anytime. Bye. Student. Bye. Now answer the question. Number 15. Why does the student come to the library? To learn about the library's resources. B. To ask about interlibrary loans. C. To attend the new student orientation. Or D. To start work on a research project. And it's A. To learn about the library's resources. 16. Why does the librarian point out the history section to the student? A. She wants to point out the closest area containing copy machines. B. She assumes that he will need to do research there. C. The student is looking for a book he used at his last school. And D. Students sometimes mistakenly assume that the section contains literature books. And this one is going to be B. She assumes that he will need to do research there. What does the student imply about the interlibrary loan service at his last school? A. He never used it. B. He came to appreciate it. C. It was inconvenient. And D. It was expensive. And 17 is going to be C. It was inconvenient. 18. What does the student need to do before he can use any rare books? Choose two answers. A. Purchase a card. B. Obtain permission. C. Put on gloves. D. Try the interlibrary loan first. So we're going to put B as obtain permission and C. Put on gloves. Part of the conversation is repeated below. Read it and answer the question. Student. I'll have all the resources, all the books and information I need right here in one place. Librarian. Yep, that's the idea. Which sentence best expresses what the librarian means when she says this? Librarian. Yep, that's the idea. A. I wish this were true. B. That is not a very good idea. C. Thanks for your suggestion. D. That is what we intended. And the answer is D. That is what we intended. So the next exercise we'll do is the listening. This is a lecture and questions. And we'll start with the transcript, and this is on theater history. We'll start with the narrator. Listen to part of a lecture in a class on theater history. The professor is discussing the theater of 19th century France. Professor. The 19th century was the time that saw what we call realism develop in the European theater. To understand this, though, we first need to look at an earlier form of drama known as the well-made play, which basically was a pattern for constructing plays that, beginning with some early 19th century comedies in France, proved very successful commercially. The dramatic devices used here weren't actually anything new. They'd been around for centuries. But the formula for a well-made play required that certain of these elements be included in a particular order, and most importantly, that everything in the play be logically connected. In fact, some of these playwrights would start by writing the end of the play and work backward towards the beginning, just to make sure that each event led logically from what had gone before. Okay, so what are the necessary elements of a well-made play? Well, the first is logical exposition. Exposition is whatever background information you have to reveal to the audience so they'll understand what's going on. Before this time, exposition might have come from actors simply giving speeches. Someone might walk out on stage and say, "In fair Verona, where we lay our scene," and then tell all about the feuding families of Romeo and Juliet. But for the well-made play, even the exposition had to be logical, believable. So, For example, you might have two servants gossiping as they're cleaning the house, and one says, "Oh, what a shame, the master's son is still not married." And the other might mention a rumor about a mysterious gentleman who's just moved into town with his beautiful daughter. These comments are part of the play's logical exposition. The next key element of a well-made play is referred to as the inciting incident. After we have the background information, we need to take a moment that gets things moving, that really makes the audience interested in what happens to the characters we just heard about. So for example, after the two servants reveal all this background information, we meet the young man just as he first lays eyes on the beautiful young woman and immediately falls in love. This is the inciting incident. It sets off the plot of the play. Now, the plot of a well-made play is usually driven by secrets, things that the audience knows, but the characters often don't know. So, for example, the audience learns through a letter or through someone else's conversation who this mysterious gentleman is and why he left the town many years before. But the young man doesn't know about this, and the woman doesn't understand the ancient connection between her family and his. And before the secrets are revealed to the main characters, the plot of the play proceeds as a series of sort of up and down moments. For example, the woman first appears not to even notice the young man, and it seems to him like the end of the world. But then he learns that she actually wants to meet him too, so life is wonderful. Then he tries to talk with her. Maybe her father gets furious for no apparent reason, so they can't see each other. But just as the young man has almost lost all hope, he finds out. Well, you get the idea. The reversals of fortune continue, increasing the audience's tension and excitement, making them wonder if everything is going to come out okay or not. Next comes an element known as the obligatory scene. It's a scene, a moment in which all the secrets are revealed. And generally things turn out well for the hero and others we care about. A happy ending of some sort. This became so popular that a playwright almost had to include it in every play, which is why it's called the obligatory scene. And that's followed by the final dramatic element, the denouement or the resolution, when all the loose ends have to be tied up in a logical way. Remember, the obligatory scene gives the audience emotional pleasure, but the denouement offers the audience a logical conclusion. That's the subtle distinction we need to try very hard to keep in mind. So, as I said, the well-made play, this form of playwriting became the basis for realism and drama and for a lot of very popular 19th century plays, and also a pattern we see in the plots of the many later plays and even movies that we see today. Let's take a look. Directions now answer the questions. What is the lecture mainly about? A. The importance of creating believable characters in plays. B. The influence of the literature of realism on French theater. C. A successful standard formula for writing plays. D. A famous example of a well-made play. We'll say it's C. A successful standard formula for writing plays. 21. According to the professor, why did some playwrights write the end of a play before the beginning? A. To produce multiple scripts as quickly as possible. B. To prevent the audience from using logic to guess the ending. C. To avoid writing endings similar to those of other plays. D. To ensure that the plot would develop in a logical manner. The answer is D. To ensure that the plot would develop in a logical manner. 22. Why does the professor mention a conversation between two servants? A. To give examples of typical characters in a well-made play. B, to show how background information might be revealed in a well-made play. C, to explain why Romeo and Juliet can be considered a well-made play. D, to explain how playwrights develop the obligatory scene of a well-made play. And we'll say B, to show how background information might be revealed in a well-made play. 23. According to the professor, what dramatic elements are typically included in a well-made play to help move the plot forward? Choose two answers. A, a series of major changes in the hero's apparent chances of success. B, the introduction of new characters midway through the play. C, information known to the audience but not to the main characters. D, the movement of major characters from one setting to another. This would be 24 is A. The difference between them might be unclear to some people. 25. Part of the lecture is repeated below. Read it and answer the question. Professor, this is the inciting incident. It sets off the plot of the play. Why does the professor say this? Professor, it sets off the plot of the play. A, to help students understand the meaning of a new term. B, to indicate that his point is not related to the main topic of the lecture. C, to emphasize one element of a play over all others. D, to begin to summarize the main points of the play. We'll say A, to help the students understand the meaning of a new term. Okay, we're going to do one more listening exercise. This is listening practice set 3. And this is also a conversation between the narrator and a professor. Narrator: listen to part of a lecture in a chemistry class. The professor has been discussing the periodic table of elements. Okay, so this is a lecture, so you will just hear the professor speaking in the audio. Professor, so are there any questions? Female student: yes. Professor Harrison, you were saying that the periodic table is predictive. But what exactly does that mean? I mean, I understand how it organizes the elements, but where's the prediction? Professor: okay, let's look at the periodic table again. Okay, it groups elements into categories that share certain properties, right? Student: Professor: and it's arranged according to increasing atomic number. Which is? Female student: the number of protons in each atom of an element. Professor: right. Well, early versions of the periodic table had gaps, missing elements. Every time you have one more proton, you have another element, and then, oops, there'd be an atomic number for which there was no known element. And the prediction was that an element with that atomic number existed somewhere, but it just hadn't been found yet. And its location in the periodic table would tell you what properties it should have. It was really pretty exciting for scientists at that time to find the missing elements and confirm their predicted properties. Actually, that reminds me of a good example of this, element 43. See, on the table, the symbols for elements 42 and 44? Well, in early versions of the table, there was no symbol for an element with 43 protons because an element had yet been discovered with 43 protons. So the periodic table had a gap between the elements 42 and 44. And then in 1925, a team of chemists, led by a scientist named Ida Tack, claimed that they had found element 43. They had been using a relatively new technology called X-ray spectroscopy. And they were using this to examine an ore sample. And they claimed that they'd found an element with 43 protons, and they named it Mesurium. Professor Harrison, then how come in my periodic table here, element 43 is Tc? That's technetium, right? Okay, let me add that. Actually, that's the point I'm coming to. Hardly anyone believed that Tack had discovered a new element. X-ray spectroscopy was a new method at the time, and they were never able to isolate enough Mesurium to have a weighable sample to convince everyone of their discovery, so they were discredited. But then, 12 years later in 1937, a different team became the first to synthesize an element using a cyclotron, and that element had 43 protons. That's right, but they named it technetium to emphasize that it was artificially created with technology. And people thought that synthesizing this element, making it artificially was the only way to get it. We still hadn't found it occurring in nature. Now element 43, whether you call it Mesurium or technetium, is radioactive. Why does that matter? What's true of a radioactive element? Female student. It decays. It turns into other elements. Oh, so does that explain why it was missing in the periodic table? Professor, exactly. Because of its radioactive decay, element 43 doesn't last very long. And therefore, if it ever had been present on Earth, it would have decayed ages ago. So this Mesurium people were obviously wrong, and the technetium people were right, right? Well, that was then. Now we know that element 43 does occur naturally. It can be naturally generated from uranium atoms that have spontaneously split. And guess what? The ore sample the Mesurium group was working with had plenty of uranium in it, enough to split into measurable amounts of Mesurium. So Tack's team might very well have found small amounts of Mesurium in the ore sample. It's just that once it was generated from split uranium, it decayed very quickly. And here's an incredible irony. Ida Tack, the chemist who led the Mesurium team, well, she was the first to suggest that uranium could break up into smaller pieces. But she didn't know that was the defense of their own discovery of element 43. Male student. So is my version of the periodic table element, is my version of the periodic table wrong? Should element 43 really be called Mesurium? Professor, maybe, but it's hard to tell for sure after all this time. If Ida Tack's group did discover element 43, they didn't publish enough detail on their methods or instruments for us to know for sure. But I'd like to think element 43 was discovered twice. As Mesurium, it was the first element discovered that occurs in nature only from spontaneous fission, and as technetium, it was the first element discovered in a laboratory. And of course, it was an element the periodic table led us to expect existed before anyone had found it or made it. Now answer the questions. Number 26. In the beginning of the lecture, a student asks a question about the periodic table. How does the story of element 43 answer her question? A. By providing an example of an element whose place in the periodic table was moved. B. By providing an example of an element whose existence was predictable from the periodic table. C. By providing an example of an element which scientists predicted was formed from uranium. D. By providing an example of an element that can only be made artificially. So 26, we're going to say B. By providing an example of an element whose existence was predictable from the periodic table. 27. What does the professor say about early versions of the periodic table? A. Early versions listed 2 names for some elements. B. Early versions had the incorrect atomic number for some elements. C. Early versions were not as easy to use as modern versions. D. Early versions did not list an element for every atomic number. We'll say D. Early versions did not list an element for every atomic number. 28. What fact inspired researchers to give the name technetium to element 43? A. The element was radioactive. B. The element was derived from uranium. C. The element was created artificially. D. The element was found using X-ray spectroscopy. C. The element was created artificially. 29. What characteristics of element 43 might explain why the scientific community doubted the findings of Ida Tack's team? A. Element 43 has a very fast rate of decay. B. Element 43 always contains small amounts of other elements. C. Element 43 cannot be created artificially. D. Element 43's radioactivity makes it easy to isolate and measure. We'll say A. Element 43 has a very fast rate of decay. Number 30. What does the professor believe about the claim that Ida Tack's team made about element 43? A. Scientists should have accepted the claim when it was first published. B. There is not enough evidence to know if the team actually discovered element 43. C. The team's unusual scientific methods were unreliable. D. If the team's ore sample had contained element 43, the team would have been able to isolate a weighable amount. That's B. There is not enough evidence to know if the team actually discovered element 43. 31. Part of the lecture is repeated below. Read it and answer the question. Professor, and here's an incredible irony. Ida Tack, the chemist who led the Masurium team, well, she was the first to suggest that uranium could break up into smaller pieces. But she didn't know that was the defense of her own discovery of element 43. What does the professor imply about the chemist Ida Tack when he says this? Professor, but she didn't know that was a defense of her own discovery of element 43. A. She did not realize that the periodic table predicted the radioactivity of element 43. B. She did not understand why her team's findings were dismissed by the scientific community. C. Her theory about uranium would have explained the presence of element 43 in her team's ore sample. D. Her theory about uranium would have explained the errors that created element 43 in a cyclotron. We'll say C. Her theory about uranium would have explained the presence of element 43 in her team's ore sample. Okay, so this section measures your ability to speak about a variety of topics. This is the speaking section. The speaking section includes written transcripts of the audio portions of the test. If you have access to people with good English pronunciation, ask them to read the transcripts aloud to you. Listening to the transcripts is better practice than reading them on your own. If someone reads the transcripts to you, make sure you see the pictures. Listen to or read each transcript only one time. For speaking practice set 1, you will speak about a familiar topic. Your response is scored on your ability to speak clearly and coherently about the topic. For speaking practice set 2, you will first read a short text and then listen to or read a transcript of a conversation on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about both. You will need to combine appropriate information from the text and the transcript to provide a complete answer to the question. Your response is scored on your ability to speak clearly and coherently, and on your ability to accurately convey information about the text and the transcript. For speaking practice set 3, you will listen to or read part of a lecture. You will then be asked a question about it. Your response is scored on your ability to speak clearly and coherently, and on your ability to accurately convey information from the lecture. You may take notes, and you may use your notes to help you prepare your response. For each question, you will be given a short time to prepare your response. When the preparation time is up, record yourself answering the question as completely as possible. Now begin the speaking section. Speaking practice set 1 question. You will now be asked to give your opinion about a familiar topic. Give yourself 15 seconds to prepare your response, then record yourself speaking for 45 seconds. Some people enjoy taking risks and trying new things. Others are not adventurous. They are cautious and prefer to avoid danger. Let's pull up a timer. Okay, we'll just do an approximate. Okay, number 32. Preparation time 15 seconds, response time 45 seconds. Some people enjoy taking risks and trying new things. Others are not adventurous. They are cautious and prefer to avoid danger. Which behavior do you think is better? Explain why. In my opinion, people who enjoy taking risk and trying new things is more my style. I prefer to be more adventurous and to take risks, try new things. I think this really helps us learn. It helps push us out of our comfort zone and helps us to grow. And it's easy to be safe. It's easy to stay home and not go anywhere and just stay home. That doesn't help us grow. That just keeps us kind of in our bubble. I think the best thing to do is to just push yourself and to try new things. So I think it's better to take risks and try new things. Okay, let's do the speaking practice set 2. Passage, conversation, and question. Direction. The university is making a change in the courses it will offer. Read the article from the university newspaper about the change. Give yourself 45 seconds to read the article. Reading time is 45 seconds. Sculpture courses to be discontinued. University administrators announced yesterday that the sculpture program, a division of the art department, will be eliminated. The main reason is a lack of student interest, reported one administrator. Although the number of art students has increased, fewer and fewer art majors are taking sculpture classes. Furthermore, the department's only sculpture professor is retiring this year. Given the art department's limited budget, the administrator explained, it just doesn't make sense to hire a new full-time professor to teach sculpture for only a handful of students. Narrator. Now listen to 2 students discussing the article. Male student. Everything all right? Female student. Yeah. I'm just upset about that article I showed you this morning. Male student. Why? What's the big deal? Female student. Well, as an art major, I think it's a big loss for the department. The university's got it all wrong. Male student. What do you mean? Female student. Well, the low enrollment isn't because art majors don't want to take these classes. Problem is, who has time to take them when there are so many other requirements? Male student. I don't understand. Female student. See, the classes they're eliminating are all optional. The required courses are mostly painting and drawing, and they take up all our time. What we really need are different requirements. Then art majors could take better variety of classes. All the things we're interested in. Male student. That makes sense. But the thing about the professor. Female student. Well, that's true, but still, they're being drastic. If money's the problem, they could hire a part-time professor, or most of the professors in the department have secondary fields. Male student. Really? Female student. Yeah. At least a few painting teachers are also great sculptors. I'm sure one of them could teach a class. Directions. Give yourself 30 seconds to prepare your response to the following question. Then record yourself speaking for 60 seconds. The woman expresses her opinion of the university's plan. State her opinion and explain the reason she gives for holding that opinion. So the woman's opinion is that the university's plan is a bad idea. She doesn't want to see fewer classes. She wants them to keep not only the sculpture class, but any other optional class that may be in the works to be eliminated. She says students need to have a variety, that most of the required classes are art and painting, and she wants there to not be so many required classes so that the students have an option to take other classes. So that's her reasoning. Let's look at speaking practice set 3, lecture and question. Here is the transcript. Now listen to part of a lecture in a business class. Professor, today we'll talk about how companies determine the initial price for their products. By that, I mean when they first introduce a product in the market. There are different approaches, and today we'll discuss 2 of them. They are quite different, each with their own advantages. One approach or strategy sets the initial price of the product high, followed by a lower price at a later stage. Why? Well, when introducing a new product, companies want to build a high-quality image for it. Products that cost more are believed to be higher quality. So during the early stages of the product life cycle, companies can make very high profits from consumers willing to pay more for a high-quality product. And although consumers know that prices will eventually go down, they're also willing to pay more to get the product sooner. This approach works very well. Oh, innovative, high-tech products, for example. Now just think about when video recorders or video cameras or even cell phones first came out. They were expensive, but then they became much more accessible. Another very common strategy sets an initial price low. Now this happens when the market is already saturated with the product, and the strategy is to undercut its competitors. Say there's a newly starting computer maker trying to gain market share. So what do? Well, they offer a computer at an affordable price, lower than existing brands. By doing this, the company appeals to new consumers who weren't probably even interested in getting a computer. Well, of course, to existing consumers who now might be tempted to switch brands. Now, how does this company make profits with its low-priced computer? One thing that's often done is to encourage their customers to buy accessories. also manufactured by them, like printers or software, for example. Directions. Give yourself 20 seconds to prepare your response to the following question, then record yourself speaking for 60 seconds. Using the points and examples from the lecture, explain the two pricing strategies described by the professor. So the two pricing strategies this professor explains are the initial approach to set the price of a product high, then reduce the price at a later time. And this is to give the image of a high quality product. Most people believe that products that cost more are high quality. So in the beginning, they will make the product a higher price in order to kind of build their reputation as a quality product. The second strategy is to set the initial price low, and this is to kind of undercut the competitors and to try to convince people who may not be looking for a computer to buy. The computer's an affordable price, it's lower than the existing brands, and so new customers are more likely to give them a try. So both of these are the two strategies. The second one can help people to switch brands, but the new one can start out with a high reputation. So both of those are strategies used by marketing and business. The next section is the writing section. It says this section measures your ability to use writing to communicate in an academic environment. The writing section includes a written transcript of the audio portion of the test. If you have access to someone with good English pronunciation, ask the person to read the transcript aloud to you. Listening to the transcript is better practice than reading it to yourself. As someone reads the transcript to you, make sure you see the picture. Listen to or read the transcript only one time. For writing practice set 1, you will read a passage and listen to or read a lecture. You may take notes. Then you will respond to a question that asks you about the relationship between the reading passage and the lecture. Try to answer as completely as possible using information from the reading passage and the lecture. The question does not ask you to express your personal opinion. You may consult the reading passage again when it is time for you to write. You may use your notes to help you answer the question. Typically, an effective response will be 150 to 225 words. Your response is judged on the quality of your writing and on the completeness and the accuracy of the content. Now begin the writing section. Writing practice set 1. Passage, lecture, and question. Directions. Give yourself 3 minutes to read the passage. In an effort to encourage ecologically sustainable forestry practices, an international organization started issuing certifications to wood companies that met high ecological standards by conserving resources and recycling materials. Companies that receive this certification can attract customers by advertising their products as eco-certified. Around the world, many wood companies have adapted new, ecologically friendly practices in order to receive eco-certification. However, it is unlikely that the wood companies in the United States will do the same for several reasons. First, American consumers are exposed to so much advertising that they would not value or even pay attention to the eco-certification label. Because so many mediocre products are labeled new or improved, American consumers do not place much trust in advertising claims in general. Second, eco-certification wood will be more expensive than uncertified wood because in order to earn eco-certification, a wood company must pay to have its business examined by a certified agency. This additional cost gets passed on to consumers. American consumers tend to be strongly motivated by price, and therefore they are likely to choose cheaper uncertified wood products, according to American wood companies. Accordingly, American wood companies will prefer to keep their prices low rather than obtain eco-certification. Third, although some people claim that it always makes good business sense for American companies to keep up with the developments in the rest of the world, this argument is not convincing. Pursuing certification would make sense for American wood companies only if they marketed most of their products abroad, but that is not the case. American wood businesses sell most of their products in the United States, catering to a very large customer base that is satisfied with the merchandise. Directions. Here is the transcript. Now listen to a part of a lecture on the topic you just read about. Professor: well, despite what many people say, there's good reason to think that many American wood companies will eventually seek eco-certification for their wood products. First off, consumers in the United States don't treat all advertising the same. They distinguish between advertising claims that companies make about their own products and claims made by independent certification agencies. Americans have a lot of confidence in independent consumer agencies. Thus, ecologically minded Americans are likely to react very favorably to wood products ecologically certified by an independent organization with an international reputation for trustworthiness. Second point, of course, it's true that American consumers care a lot about price. Who doesn't? But studies of how consumers make decisions show that price alone determines consumers' decisions only when the price of one competing product is much higher or lower than the other. When the price difference between two products is small, say less than 5%, as is the case with certified wood, Americans often do choose on factors other than price, and Americans are becoming increasingly convinced of the value of preserving and protecting the environment. And third, U.S. wood companies should definitely pay attention to what's going on in the wood business internationally, not because of foreign consumers, but because of foreign competition. As I just told you, there's a good chance that many American consumers will be interested in eco-certified products. And guess what? If American companies are slow capturing those customers, you can make sure that foreign companies will soon start crowding into the American market, offering eco-certified wood that domestic companies don't. Direction. Give yourself 20 minutes to plan and write your response. Your response is judged on the quality of the writing, on how well it presents the point in the lecture and the relationship to the reading passage. Typically, an effective response will be 150 to 225 words. You may view the reading passage while you respond. Summaries. Number 35. Summarize the points made in the lecture, being sure to explain how they cast doubt on specific points made in the reading passage. If you would like me to look at your reading, you can always submit that to me in lesson, and we'll stop there for today.